Hey, Julie Fei-Fan Balzer here, and the good folks at Grafix Plastics sent me over some of their black plastic. It behaves very much like Yupo, and so I labeled it with a bunch of different art material names. Now you're going to be able to see me testing them out. So these are permapaque markers. They're permanent markers that you don't shake or anything. They dry obviously very quickly, even on plastic. I have a bunch of different Prismacolor colored pencils. Some of them are Prismacolor Premier, and don't worry, I'm going to show you the results of everything at the end. I have some watercolor pencils. I did water down everything just to kind of be able to check the results at the end, which I'll show you of what it looked like when it dried on the plastic. These are Jelly Roll pens. There's some Moonlight pens and a white pen in there. These are some of my favorite pens I know to use in my art journal. I tried out a couple different tip widths to see how those turned out on top of the plastic. Marabou art crayons are water-soluble crayons, so they're going to be very similar to lots of other kind of water-soluble products. I used the Pen Touch paint markers here. They're a traditional kind of metallic paint markers that you shake, you press in the tips, and then you can go ahead and write, and they did a great job, dried real fast too. I used two colors of gesso. I used white gesso and gray gesso, and I also wetted the gray and the white gesso with some water because, again, I was curious to see how the water would dry on the plastic. I used a couple different acrylic paints. I used Liquitex Basics. This is Dino Wakely's paint for Ranger. That's a craft paint. I used transparent and fluid acrylics from Golden, and then I added some water to everything to see how it was going to go. I also wanted to see how the paint would react through a stencil, so this is the same paints that I'm using, just using it through a stencil. It actually was a really clean result there. So now I'm using Golden Interference paints. This is a kind of paint that doesn't appear on a light surface, only appears on a dark surface because of the mica powders that are inside of it that sort of refract the light is the best way to describe it. So I used a green and a blue, and I of course added some water on there. I also wanted to try out some metallic acrylic paint. So I'm using a gold, and then I believe I'm using micaceous iron oxide, which is kind of a black, glittery looking paint. I want to try Posca pens, which are another kind of paint pen, very similar to the metallic pens, except they're in sort of more matte colors, not metallic. Watercolor pooled a lot. The color was shockingly vibrant on the dark background. These are Core watercolors, spelled Q-O-R. But couldn't really control how they were pooling. So then I tried out the Marabou spray ink, which is art sprays. These are like acrylic spray ink, so they're usually permanent on paper. And I wanted to see how those were going to look. The gouache, this is acrylic gouache from Holbein, so not a totally traditional gouache, but still curious to see how it turned out. I did wet the brush when I went into the central areas of the circle, again, because I was curious to see how that paint was going to dry on the plastic surface. And then acrylic ink, this is all Liquitex acrylic ink, which is basically very, very thin acrylic paint. How is that going to dry? Who knows? This is a hand-carved stamp. I'm putting on some pigment ink, and then I'm dropping some glitter embossing powder on it. And we're going to see what happens to the plastic when we heat it with a heat gun. And also like how the melting process goes too with the embossing powder as well. So we're going to wait for that in just a minute. So now I have a very small gelatin plate and some acrylic paint. I'm going to bring a stencil in and see how the plastic takes stenciling. You can see you get that kind of smushed look from it. These are pan pastels. These are pastels obviously in a pan form that I'm putting through a stencil. And then I had a lot of trouble with these. So I put some matte medium on top, which is the usual way I transfer it to paper. Did not transfer. So then I thought, okay, maybe I'm doing something wrong because it's just not transferring to anything. It's not transferring to a plain piece of paper. Well, a little bit to a plain piece of paper. So then I thought I would try out with a very thin layer of white paint. And it transfers to the paper, but not to the plastic. So it clearly needs a paper absorbent surface. So here are some of the results. You can see them. Everything's dry now. So you can see how the water affected the gouache. The stenciling looks great. That didn't work. The spray ink was not a big hit. Too transparent, I think. The watercolor is cool. I'm not sure if you could do things purposely because I'm not sure how much you can control it. Gesso looks totally great. Even in the wet spots, it looks great. The Jelly Roll pens look exactly the same as they did, as do the Permapaque markers. That's all the acrylic paint now that it's dry. The shiny paints are really shiny on that black plastic. The colored pencils also dried nicely and they don't rub off with your hand or anything like that. That's why I keep running my finger over it to see if things rub off. That's a important thing when you're working in an art journal. Oh, that micaceous iron oxide looks so good. I love that one, I think, the most. Interference paint looks almost identical as to when I very first painted it. The embossing powder was not a great hit. The plastic definitely did not love the heat. So not a great one. The gelatin printing turned out pretty cool. It has that little dendritic look right in it. And look at that acrylic ink. It looks like it's wet, but it is completely dry. So I hope that you'll give the Grafix black plastic a try. This is also a fun way to try out new supplies when you have them. It honestly takes like maybe an hour to get it done. So thanks for watching, and I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. And why don't we connect on Instagram? I'm Balzer Designs, and I'd love to meet you.